I never saw it coming.
The night felt ordinary at first.
I had finished work, driven home, and parked my car in front of the house like I did every day. The streetlights cast a yellow glow on the wet pavement from an earlier rain, and everything seemed quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you wonder if the world has paused, just to tell you something you're not ready to hear. I stepped out of the car and paused for a long moment, just breathing, feeling the cool air on my face, pretending everything was normal, but deep down a seed of unease had already taken root. My keys jingled in my hand as I walked up to the door. I had no idea that tonight, something inside my life would shift forever. When I opened the door, the house smelled familiar, warm and clean, but something was off. There were no cheerful greetings, no sounds of movement. The silence was heavier than any noise I had ever experienced. I set my bag down and called out, "Hello?" But the echo of my own voice returned to me, hollow and strange. I walked through the living room slowly, my eyes scanning the furniture, the photographs on the walls, every little detail that once made this place feel like home. And then I saw them, sitting there as if nothing was wrong, calm, composed, with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. And in that moment, the truth crashed over me harder than anything I could have imagined. They had been lying to me. They had been pretending. They had chosen this carefully, deliberately. I remember standing there frozen, unable to speak, unable to move. The betrayal wasn't loud. There were no accusations or shouting. There was just that quiet, unbearable truth. I felt a weight settle on my chest, a pressure that made it hard to breathe. I wanted to scream, to ask why, but my voice was caught somewhere in my throat. I realized that everything I had believed in, every act of trust, every late-night call, every effort to keep things together, had been met with deception. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't understand. They were wrong. They had underestimated the quiet ones, the patient ones. And patience, I realized then, can be more dangerous than anger. I retreated to my room, shut the door, and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. Every memory I had with them flashed in my mind like a slideshow I had no control over. The small lies I had dismissed, the excuses I had made for their coldness, the times I had ignored my instincts, all of it lined up now, a pattern I could no longer deny. I didn't cry, at least not yet. Crying felt weak. Instead, I let the silence sink in, let it seep into every part of me. I made a promise that night. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I wouldn't let their choices define who I was. I would endure, observe, and when the time came, I would act. Not with rage, but with clarity. Days turned into weeks, and I moved through life as if nothing had happened. I returned to
work, smiled at colleagues, and maintained the routine that had once been comforting. Yet, inside I was building something that no one could see. I was gathering pieces of truth. Small details, forgotten moments, conversations remembered, messages saved, every tiny slip that revealed who they really were. I listened when they spoke, watched their interactions with others, noting inconsistencies, contradictions, and lies. They spoke freely, confident that their deception was hidden. And in doing so, they gave me everything I needed. Each careless word, each smug smile, each small boast against me became part of a puzzle I was quietly assembling. I started noticing changes in myself as well. The anger I had expected to feel didn't arrive. Instead, I felt a strange calm, a sharp focus that made me see things in ways I hadn't before. I remembered the nights I had spent worrying about their opinions, the days I had bent over backward to maintain appearances, and I realized how powerless I had been while thinking I was strong. Now I felt a new kind of strength. I was not reckless, I was not vengeful, but I was patient. I understood that true power doesn't need to be loud or dramatic. It just waits, and patience, as I would soon see, always has its moment. Months passed, and I continued to observe, always from a distance, always with careful attention. I didn't confront them, didn't push, didn't reveal any part of what I knew. I allowed them to believe they had won, to think I had accepted my fate. But every lie they told, every attempt to manipulate perception, only strengthened my resolve. I documented everything. Conversations were replayed in my mind until every detail was sharp. I compared statements, traced timelines, noted discrepancies. The more I looked, the more their carefully constructed facade began to crumble, unseen by anyone but me. The quiet patience I held became my weapon, and I realized that revenge need not be a fire. It could be a slow, unstoppable tide that reshapes the shore. Then came the day of revelation. I invited them over under the pretense of discussing a trivial matter. They arrived confident, casual, unaware of the storm, waiting in silence. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. I simply began to tell the story as it had happened. Every lie, every betrayal, every hidden motive laid bare. I spoke calmly, evenly, letting the truth resonate in the room. And slowly I watched. I saw the discomfort creeping into their expressions, the quick glances, the attempts to interrupt, all of which failed. The air shifted, the balance of power inverted, and for the first time, they realized that the person they had underestimated was no longer silent out of weakness, but out of strategy. The room grew heavy with tension as I continued. I didn't embellish, I didn't dramatize. I simply let the truth speak, and it was enough. The lies repeated so many times collapsed under the weight of facts. I could see the moment they understood, the moment they comprehended the depth of their errors. I didn't feel satisfaction in their discomfort. I didn't revel in their shame. Instead, I felt calm. I felt clarity. I felt the quiet triumph that comes not from destroying others, but from reclaiming yourself. They had thought they could manipulate me, bend me or break me, but in their arrogance, they had revealed themselves entirely, and I had been ready. After that day, my life shifted in subtle but profound ways. Friends who had doubted me began to see the truth. Some relationships healed, some did not, but all were now grounded in reality rather than deception. I carried no bitterness. I didn't need to. I had achieved something far greater than revenge. I had reclaimed my life, my confidence, my voice. I had shown that strength can exist in silence, and that justice does not always require anger, confrontation, or spectacle. Sometimes it arrives quietly, precisely, and irrevocably. And so I continued forward. Unbroken, wary but not bitter, careful but not fearful. I understood now that the quiet ones are never weak. We watch, we wait, and when the moment comes, we act not with chaos but with purpose. I had learned that true strength lies not in instant reactions, but in deliberate patience. I had learned that betrayal, though painful, can be transformed into clarity, into wisdom, into resilience, and above all, I had learned that the story is never over until you have reclaimed it yourself. After that night, life settled into an unusual rhythm. On the surface, I kept everything normal, work, errands, casual greetings with neighbors, but beneath it all, a quiet storm raged inside me. I noticed every glance, every whisper, every subtle action. People moved around me like chess pieces, unaware that I had already memorized their patterns, their weaknesses, and their unspoken agendas. The irony was sharp. They believed I had been defeated, that I had accepted my supposed role in their little narrative. They had no idea that what they saw as silence was, in fact, the calm before the storm I was quietly preparing. It was during one of these ordinary days that I noticed my first real opportunity to test their cracks. At work, one of the colleagues who had always seemed so friendly approached me with a subtle, insincere smile.
"Hey, you're looking better these days,"
he said, his tone too casual, too rehearsed. I nodded, smiled faintly, and asked about a project we were both involved in. As we spoke, his facade faltered. I caught the slip of truth in his words, a small admission that revealed how he had twisted things behind my back. Most people would have ignored it or dismissed it. But I noted every detail, committed it to memory. I understood that patience wasn't passive, it was active, meticulous observation. The following weeks brought more revelations. Friends who had once laughed easily with me began to act distant, some avoiding eye contact altogether. Others, who I had trusted implicitly, seemed to enjoy subtle power plays over me, unaware that each action they took was feeding my understanding. I began keeping a private journal, not just of events but of emotions, inconsistencies and patterns. At night, when the world was quiet, I would revisit conversations, texts, and emails, replaying them in my mind like a movie I was determined to edit until the truth became undeniable. Every inconsistency became a thread I could pull, every lie a rope that would eventually unravel completely. One evening, I returned home earlier than usual. I had noticed small signs that something major was about to unfold. Tiny gestures, whispered calls, hurried messages, and instinctively, I trusted my gut. The house was silent as usual, but this time the silence felt deliberate. I paused at the entrance, letting the stillness wash over me. Then I heard it, the faintest hint of movement from upstairs. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. Instead, I felt a strange clarity, a sense of readiness. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step deliberate, and found the evidence I had been looking for. Subtle signs of deception left in the open, almost as if they wanted me to notice but didn't expect I would. I spent that night processing it all. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It had spread into my social and professional life, touching everything I had worked for. The magnitude of it was overwhelming, yet strangely I didn't despair. Instead, I felt a focus sharpening within me, a strategic clarity I had never known. I understood that the next steps weren't about confrontation. They were about creating a path where truth would inevitably rise. I wasn't angry, at least not in the way most people think of anger. I was steady, patient, and utterly precise. As the months continued, I began subtly influencing events. Without anyone realizing it, I used my calm demeanor and silent observation to guide situations. I made decisions quietly that allowed truth to emerge naturally. A mismanaged report at work revealed who had been spreading lies about me professionally. A careless text from a trusted friend exposed hidden motivations. Every minor victory reinforced my belief that patience, quiet reflection, and strategic observation were far more powerful than loud confrontations. During this period, I also revisited old memories. Moments I had once dismissed as trivial now revealed hidden layers. A subtle tone in a conversation, an awkward hesitation, a misplaced gift, they all made sense now. Each memory was a puzzle piece, and I was finally able to see the full picture. It was astonishing how much had gone unnoticed, not because it wasn't visible, but because I had been blinded by trust. I had assumed the people I cared for were guided by loyalty, honesty, and goodwill, not realizing that some could carefully mask selfish intent. One pivotal moment came when I received a message from someone I hadn't expected, a friend who had stayed silent throughout the chaos. "Meet me," it said. The brevity and neutrality of the message were deceptive. I didn't know what they would reveal, but I sensed this could either clarify or complicate the web of deceit further. I agreed, of course, but I went without expectations. When I arrived, they greeted me with nervous energy. Speaking carefully, almost in code, I didn't want to believe it either, they confessed. "But you were right all along." That simple statement validated everything I had pieced together, reinforcing the patience I had exercised and the calm control I had maintained. By the time the final confrontation approached, the betrayers had no idea what was coming. I orchestrated a situation that appeared mundane, another casual meeting, but the truth was embedded in every word I spoke. I recounted events with precision, timing each revelation perfectly, letting their own contradictions and lies fill the gaps without me needing to push. It was mesmerizing to watch. Not because I reveled in their discomfort, but because I had transformed months of careful observation into undeniable clarity. Each person reacted differently. Some tried to twist the narrative, some faltered, some froze, but all were exposed, not through anger, but through truth. After the confrontation, I didn't celebrate and I didn't gloat. I left the room quietly, a strange calm enveloping me. The satisfaction wasn't in revenge, it was in reclaiming myself. I had survived the betrayal intact, strengthened by the experience, and had turned what could have been devastation into empowerment. I had learned that true strength comes from patience, observation, and maintaining dignity in the face of deceit. Life afterward was quiet but rich with understanding. I no longer worried about appearances or manipulations. I interacted with people with newfound discernment, valuing authenticity above all else. The experience had reshaped me, not into someone cold or vengeful, but into someone resilient, self-aware, and capable of navigating treachery without losing integrity. The silent strategy had worked. The truth had unfolded in its own time, and the world had shifted around me as a result. I realized something fundamental. Betrayal is inevitable in life, but how we respond defines our character. Some choose to fight loudly, some to collapse under the weight. But the quiet ones, the patient ones, hold the true power. I had learned that lesson in the hardest way, and I carried it forward unshaken, prepared for whatever came next. The world could try to manipulate, deceive, or mislead me again, but I would remain grounded, calm, and ready. Patience had the final word, and now so did I. Weeks turned into months, and in the quiet of my daily routine, I noticed changes not only in others, but also in myself. The betrayal had left its mark, but instead of bitterness, It carved a sense of precision and clarity into my mind. I began noticing patterns I had previously ignored. Small inconsistencies in stories, subtle shifts in tone, even the way someone's eyes avoided mine when they thought I wasn't paying attention. It was almost as if the world had revealed a secret layer, a hidden dimension of motives and intentions, and for the first time I could see it clearly. Each lie, each hidden agenda, became an open book for me to read. One afternoon, while walking home from work, I saw someone I hadn't expected, Jenna, a former friend who had distanced herself shortly after the initial betrayal. Her eyes widened when she saw me, and I noticed a flicker of guilt cross her face. "I didn't know you were watching," she said softly, almost as if confessing to a crime. I studied her carefully, noticing the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers fidgeted with her bag strap. She had believed that time and distance had erased her own role in the chaos, but I could see the cracks in her composure. I didn't scold her or demand answers. I simply nodded, acknowledging the truth she had revealed by accident. Sometimes silence is more powerful than words, and patience allows people to betray themselves without you having to say a thing. I began noticing more incidents like that, small but telling moments. A colleague at work would mutter a careless remark in a meeting. A supposed friend would accidentally reveal confidential information, and I cataloged it all meticulously. I wasn't being paranoid. I was building a timeline, collecting evidence, and preparing for the moment when the truth would no longer be a secret. Each revelation brought a strange satisfaction, not from cruelty, but from the assurance that deception always leaves traces, and that the quiet observer can gather them with careful attention. It wasn't easy, of course. There were nights when I lay awake, replaying events over and over, questioning if I had missed something, doubting if I had misunderstood. Old insecurities resurfaced, and sometimes I wondered if I had become too cautious, too observant, letting life pass while I waited. But those moments were fleeting, quickly replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. I had seen the consequences of silence misjudged as weakness, and I refused to repeat the mistakes of the past. Strength wasn't about reaction. It was about control, focus, and endurance. One evening, as I was organizing my notes and journaling observations, a memory struck me like a jolt. A conversation I had long forgotten suddenly made sense. The tone, the choice of words, the subtle hesitation, all of it lined up perfectly with the pattern of deception I had been observing. I realized that the betrayal had been planned for months, perhaps even years, carefully orchestrated to exploit my trust and patience. Instead of being disheartened, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. Now that I understood the full scope of what had happened, I could respond not with anger, but with the precision and clarity that only patience and observation could create. The next step required careful planning. I couldn't rush it. Any misstep could alert them, and I would lose the advantage I had cultivated over months. I spent weeks subtly steering conversations, observing interactions, and creating opportunities where the truth would naturally reveal itself. Sometimes it was as simple as asking the right question at the right moment, letting them expose themselves without realizing it. Other times it involved letting small mistakes go, knowing they would multiply over time, revealing the pattern I had already discerned. Patience had become my greatest ally. The final confrontation didn't come as an explosive moment, as one might expect. It was calm, calculated, and entirely under my control. I invited everyone involved into a casual setting, under the guise of a routine gathering. They arrived unaware that the months of careful observation, documentation, and strategic patience had culminated in this single, decisive moment. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply began recounting events as they had occurred, calmly, methodically, letting the weight of the truth speak for itself. Each lie, each half-truth, each manipulation became painfully obvious as I narrated the timeline with clarity. Their attempts to interrupt or twist the story fell flat, because I had anticipated every possible argument and had prepared responses that didn't rely on emotion, only fact. I noticed the subtle shifts in their expressions. Hesitation, surprise, guilt, frustration. One by one, the masks they had worn for so long began to slip. They realized, perhaps too late, that the quiet, patient observer they had dismissed as weak had been the most powerful force in the room. The satisfaction I felt wasn't in their discomfort. It was in the undeniable clarity of truth, in the restoration of my own dignity. in the reclamation of control over a life they had tried to manipulate. Afterward, I didn't gloat and I didn't seek validation. I walked away quietly, the calm aftermath of the confrontation settling over me like a gentle weight. I had achieved something far greater than revenge. I had reclaimed myself. I had proven that strength is not always loud, that patience is not weakness, and that truth, when wielded wisely, is far more potent than anger. Life resumed, but it was different now, richer, clearer, and more self-aware. I engaged with people more discerningly, valued honesty above appearances, and carried the lessons of betrayal with quiet pride. The months that followed reinforced the truth I had discovered. I observed new relationships, tested old assumptions, and approached life with a balance of caution and confidence. Every interaction, every word, every subtle shift in behavior became data to be analyzed. I became more perceptive, not paranoid, understanding that human behavior is a web of motives, fears, and desires. I knew now that betrayal could come from the most unexpected corners, and that the only way to guard against it was awareness, patience, and the quiet cultivation of strength. One day I reflected on the journey I had taken. The betrayal that had once felt like a crushing weight now appeared as a catalyst, a force that had reshaped my life in ways I could never have anticipated. I was stronger, more resilient, and more attuned to the nuances of human behavior. I had learned to navigate a world filled with hidden agendas without losing myself. And most importantly, I had discovered that the quiet ones, those who observe and wait, hold a power that is often invisible but always enduring. Looking back, I realized that revenge isn't about spectacle, anger, or destruction. It's about reclaiming your life, your dignity, and your clarity. It's about showing the world and yourself that you are unbroken. The experience had transformed me into someone who could face deception with equanimity, who could endure betrayal without losing composure, and who could act decisively when the moment was right. Strength, I had learned, lies not in reaction but in patient observation and deliberate action. After the confrontation, life settled into a rhythm that felt different, almost surreal. The tension that had shadowed every day for months had lifted, yet the echoes of betrayal lingered in subtle ways. I walked through familiar streets, visited the same cafes, worked in the same office, but nothing felt the same. The world had shifted not because it had changed, but because I had. Every interaction carried a new awareness, a heightened sensitivity to truth and deception. I noticed the micro-expressions people made, the hesitation in their words, the subtle contradictions in their actions. I had become an observer of life in a way I never anticipated, and it was both unnerving and empowering. One afternoon, a casual lunch with a former colleague reminded me just how much had changed. She greeted me warmly, her eyes sincere, and yet I noticed a flicker of hesitation, an unconscious micro-expression of surprise that told me she had expected me to be different, bitter perhaps, or broken. We talked about work, projects, and mutual acquaintances, but I found myself analyzing every sentence, not with suspicion but with clarity. I understood motives without needing to question intentions. I realized how much of life is built on subtle assumptions, and how easy it is for trust to be exploited when one is unaware. And I also realized how liberating it was to finally be awake, to navigate the world with full awareness and a calm mind. During those months, I also reflected deeply on the relationships that had truly mattered, and those that had been illusions. Friends I once held dear had revealed their true selves, some through betrayal, others through silence. I had learned to differentiate between genuine connection and convenience, between loyalty and performative allegiance. I began to focus on nurturing relationships with people whose intentions were clear, whose hearts were honest, and whose presence added value rather than chaos. It wasn't always easy, some bonds were irrevocably broken, but the clarity that emerged from betrayal was a gift I had not anticipated. I now understood that life's pain often carries lessons far greater than its immediate suffering. The days were punctuated with quiet victories that no one else noticed. A colleague who had once undermined me subtly admitted their missteps in a team meeting, unknowingly reinforcing the careful observations I had documented. A friend who had avoided me for months finally reached out, seeking clarity and understanding. I didn't scold, didn't lecture, I simply listened, letting the truth speak for itself. And in those moments I understood a profound reality. Confrontation isn't always about proving power. Sometimes it's about letting facts and patience reveal the story naturally. I had learned that revenge, when necessary, need not be loud or dramatic, it can be quiet, precise, and ultimately far more impactful. There were nights, of course, when memories of the betrayal surfaced with painful clarity. I would lie awake revisiting conversations, reconstructing events, and sometimes feeling the old sting of disbelief. But now those nights were tempered by understanding rather than anger. I knew the patterns, I knew the motives, and I knew that every act of deception had been temporary, against the long-term truth I had cultivated. I also discovered a strange gratitude. The betrayal had forced me to grow, to sharpen my perception, and to confront my own vulnerabilities. I had faced a profound personal challenge and emerged stronger, more self-aware, and more capable of navigating a world that often hides truth beneath appearances. Months later, an unexpected encounter reminded me of just how far I had come. A person I hadn't seen since the initial betrayals approached me on the street, hesitated, and then said softly, "I always thought you would react differently. You've changed, in a way I didn't expect." I nodded, understanding the implication. Patience, observation, and quiet resilience had not only preserved me, but had transformed me. I didn't need to explain or justify. The calm confidence I carried was enough to convey everything. I realized then that strength is not always seen in action, but in the quiet endurance of integrity, in the ability to stand firm without spectacle, and in the patience to let life unfold truthfully. As the months continued, I focused on rebuilding not only my sense of trust but also my life. I explored passions I had neglected, reconnected with parts of myself that had been suppressed by doubt and betrayal, and embraced a sense of purpose that went beyond reactive emotions. I traveled to places I had dreamed of visiting, engaged with art and literature that resonated with me, and cultivated a daily rhythm that balanced awareness with peace. Every step forward was deliberate, intentional, and guided by the lessons I had learned about patience, observation, and the quiet but undeniable power of truth. One of the most profound realizations came when I revisited the house where everything had begun. I walked through the rooms, the familiar furniture and photographs now holding different meanings. I could see the space not as a place of pain, but as a canvas of experience that had shaped me. The silence that had once been oppressive now felt comforting. It was a reminder that life, no matter how quiet or deceptive it may seem, carries opportunities for clarity, resilience, and transformation. I understood that betrayal, though painful, need not define us. Instead, it can illuminate paths we might never have discovered without it. I also noticed a change in how people interacted with me. Those who had once doubted or deceived me treated me with a newfound respect, though I never sought it. It was not about asserting dominance or proving a point. It was simply the natural outcome of patience and clarity. I saw how truth, when wielded with calm precision, reshapes perceptions in ways that anger never could. And more importantly, I saw how much of life's chaos is self-imposed, how much stress and conflict arise from reaction rather than reflection, and how profound it is to move through the world with quiet, deliberate strength. In quiet moments, I reflected on the lessons the experience had offered. Trust is precious, yes, but discernment is vital. Betrayal is inevitable in life, but resilience is a choice. Patience, careful observation, and the refusal to be rushed into reaction are forms of power often overlooked. I had learned that revenge is not about destruction. It is about restoration, restoring one's dignity, clarity, and sense of self. By embracing patience and strategy, I had allowed the natural arc of truth to unfold, and in doing so, I had reclaimed not only my life but also my inner peace. As I moved forward, I carried this clarity with me into every aspect of life. I engaged with people more authentically, valued honesty and intention over appearances, and maintained a calm confidence that came from experience rather than ego. Life continued as it always does, with its challenges, surprises, and inevitable betrayals. But I was no longer afraid or unprepared. I had seen the worst, endured the pain, observed the deception, and emerged stronger. I had learned to navigate life with clarity, patience, and quiet determination, and in doing so, I had discovered the true meaning of resilience. Looking back, I understood that the night when everything seemed to break was not the end. It was a beginning, a crucible in which my patience, perception, and inner strength had been tested. I had learned that the quiet ones are never weak. They are the patient, the observant, and the resilient. Betrayal can hurt, deception can mislead, but time and clarity always reveal the truth. I had discovered that revenge, true revenge, is not about spectacle. It is about reclaiming oneself, standing with dignity, and letting life unfold in accordance with truth. Now, when I think of that night, of the betrayal, of the months of careful observation and patience, I don't feel anger or bitterness. I feel strength, clarity, and gratitude for the lessons learned. I know that I am capable of facing deception without losing myself, of enduring betrayal without despair, and of responding with quiet precision when the time is right. Life continues, as it always will, and I move forward with the knowledge that the quiet, patient, and observant always have the last word. And so I walk through the world with calm eyes and steady steps, carrying the wisdom that comes from survival, clarity, and patience. I have learned that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, observes, and waits, but when it acts, it does so with the undeniable power of truth. The story of betrayal and patience has shaped me into someone unshakable, someone who understands that the quiet ones are not weak. They are unstoppable in ways the world rarely notices, yet always respects in